This lesson is the first lesson in Unit 2, which is functions. This lesson is to identify domain and range. The goal is to identify the domain and range of a relation. What you should understand by the end of this lesson is that a relation is a set of pairs of input and output values. A relationship can be represented in 4 different ways. The input and output values in a relation are called domain and range. All right, here are the 4 ways that you will see relations represented. The first way is ordered pairs, where we have an x value and a y value. When you have an x and y value, an ordered pair, that is a relation. If you have a mapping diagram where you have an input and an output, that is also a relation. You will also have arrows going from the input to the output. You'll also have a table of values. You'll have your x, your input, and your y, output. And the final way that you'll see a relation represented is through a graph. You have your x axis and your y axis. There are your points, and that represents a relation. Those are your 4 ways to represent relations. Now this is probably one of the easier lessons that you're going to have. The domain of a relation is the set of inputs, which is the x-coordinates of the ordered pairs. The range of a relation is the set of outputs, or the y-coordinates of the ordered pairs. So if you're asked to give the domain, you just tell all the x-coordinates. If you're asked to give the range, you give the outputs or the y-coordinates. And that's all there is. Here's the first example. It says, what is the domain of this function? Well, I just said that the domain is all the x values. So I'm just going to list them down here. 4, 8, -2, 7, Now normally you would see them in order, smallest to largest, but it doesn't matter when you put them in the computer. So those are the numbers in the domain. Here's your first problem. What is the domain of this function? Practice 2. What is the domain and what is the range? Now you only list the numbers once. For example, if you'll notice, there are 2 7s. You only put the 7 in once. Practice 3. What are the domain and range of this function? All right, here's another kind of problem you're going to see. We're asked to give what is the domain and range. Well, remember the domain is the x values. So I'm going to look at where they are on the x-axis. So let's start out with the domain. And the first one that I see is this point right there. And that's -3. Then the next one over is -2. There is one at 0. And there's one on this side at 3, 4, and 5. So I have 3, 4, and 5. Now I'm going to look on the y-axis, the same dots. Only I'm going to start up here. I've got one there at 4, one at 3, one at 2, 1, 0, and -2. So I'm just going to list them in that order. So I have 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, and -2. So that is my domain and my range. Make sure you don't miss any dots. What is the domain of this function? Practice 5. What is the range of this function? And finally, practice 6. What are the domain and range of this function? Okay, you should be done with your 6 practice problems. Where are you on the scale of understanding now? Are you at beginning, learning, understanding, or are you an expert at this? Get ready to do your IXL lesson. Make sure you get a 90 or better. Good luck. And that's the end of this lesson.